So I actually, believe it or not, got about a $500,000 verdict when everything was said and done. Now, there's one issue in that case that's really important. Under maritime law, if you're ordered to do something by a superior, it's called the specific order doctrine, then as a matter of law, you can't be responsible at all. And so that case is actually on appeal right now. There's a oral hearing in the Ninth Circuit Ninth Circuit out in California, Federal Circuit. And if the Ninth Circuit decides that my client was in fact ordered to do something, and I think the evidence is overwhelming for that, we get the whole verdict.
Hey there, I just want to take a quick break from today's podcast to tell you about an event that we're hosting August 1 and 2. I'm going to be hosting a small, intimate event for solo and small firm lawyers here in our offices in Fairfax, Virginia. If you've never been to a great legal marketing event before, or even if you have, this is going to be the place for you to start. If you're running a small law firm and you're looking for ways to attract more clients without spending a lot more money, we're going to be diving deep over those 2 days into all of the little DIY things you can do, even if you have a small team. This is going to be perfect for a law firm that's doing between about $500,000 and $1 million in top-line revenue. If you're making more money than that, good for you. You're doing a lot of things right, but this event isn't for you. Let me tell you what this is not. This is not an event where, under the guise of a seminar, we're going to be selling you websites, pay-per-click ads, or other digital marketing media. That's not our space in the market. This is where you're going to learn how to effectively use your next hour and your next dollar in growing your law firm. We'll be part lecture and part workshop. There'll be some prep work to do before the event and some post-event follow-up so we can answer lingering questions and keep you motivated to building a better life for you and your family. Together, let's figure out why you're not making more money, getting better cases, and converting more of your leads. Again, this is August 1 and 2 in our offices in Fairfax, Virginia. And if you want to be on the early list of people who are getting up-to-date information, just shoot me an email at ben@greatlegalmarketing.com. That's ben@greatlegalmarketing.com, and I'll make sure you're one of the first to know.
Welcome to the Renegade Lawyer Podcast, the show where we ask the questions, why aren't more lawyers living flourishing lives and inspiring others? And can you really get wealthy while doing only the work you love with people you like? Many lawyers are. Get ready to hear from your host, Ben Glass, the founder of the law firm Ben Glass Law in Fairfax, Virginia, and Great Legal Marketing, an organization that helps good people succeed by coaching, inspiring, and supporting law firm owners. Join us for today's conversation.
Hey everyone, this is Ben, back to the Renegade Lawyer Podcast. Every episode I get to interview interesting people inside and outside of legal. Today I'm going to do something a little bit different. I'm talking to Brian Beckcom. Brian and I have been good friends for almost 20 years. And for about a decade, we saw each other regularly during the year. Brian's a great attorney down in Houston, but we haven't chatted in a while. And so I thought, let's just hit the record button, Brian, and let's catch up with each other, and let's just let people listen in on the conversation. So you cool with that?
Yeah, totally cool with that. We were just talking before we went live, Ben. Probably most of your listeners know that you had a major medical procedure recently, and I've been following you on social media like I always do, and I was telling you before we went live how you're just like you are about everything. You're positive, you're optimistic. I mean, it really is inspirational, and I apologize that I haven't dropped you a note. But anyway, I'm glad you're doing well.
No need to apologize. So Brian, and I want to catch up with you in Houston and all the weather and stuff I see in the evening news, but Brian is not only a fantastic guy, but obviously a fantastic trial lawyer. He and his partner, Vuk, have been involved in some of the biggest cases, especially in the maritime space. We'll talk about that, around the country, a very big force in the Houston, in particular, legal space. He's been a Texas super lawyer for 14 years, ever since he was eligible for that. He's won all sorts of awards, but it's the cases, Brian, that you've been involved in. And, 20 years ago or so, you and I met in our Mastermind group and in our group. And we traveled down to your place once, and you hosted dinner for the group. So I'm so glad, since we haven't chatted in a while, I'm glad to have a chance to catch up with you. because we just haven't had that opportunity. And so tell me, first of all, like, how's it going? Because, last time we talked, you have built something, I think, massive and powerful, not only just in terms of a law firm that makes money, but a law firm that has a lot of resounding effects on people. I know you represented a whole bunch of folks for one of the bad hurricanes that came through Houston. Again, as we're recording this, every night I've seen bad weather coming through Houston. And every time I see something, I'm like thinking about you. So how are you?
I'm doing great. I tell you, a number of years ago, we had I call it the power pandemic, the great chill in Texas, whatever you want to call it. But in Houston, Texas, we got below freezing and we lost power, internet, we lost plumbing for like 5 days. And I decided to finally splurge on a generator. And if you live in Houston and you don't have a generator, you kind of aren't doing it right, because you're right. Like lately, it's been terrible in Texas. The weather has been really bad. We've lost power everywhere, but every morning at 9:00, my generator turns on. I can hear it. It's a test every morning. And I finally got a chance to use it. And so my house I got 3 kids, one in college, another one about to be in college. They're all back for the summer now. And last week, my house was the most popular house in the neighborhood because we were the only ones that actually had internet and power and stuff like that. So, it's like anything. I'm sure it's, in Houston, we have flooding. In Dallas and Fort Worth, we have tornadoes and stuff like that. I have a place in Colorado and we got wildfires up there. So it doesn't really matter where you live. There's always some natural disaster or something. So I haven't figured out the place yet where we can move to where there will be no natural disasters.
No, we don't have a lot of that in Virginia. At least unless you live on the coast, like houses are maybe falling into the ocean on the coast, or they will shortly. Yeah. But, thankfully, we have remnants of storms that the rest of the country has. Now, we're conservative juries and we have tort reform and all that stuff and contributory negligence. So you probably don't want to move here.
No, not the contributory negligence is terrible. So for those that don't know, in Ben's jurisdiction, as I understand it, any contributory negligence is a total bar to recovery. So in most jurisdictions, 50% or more, the plaintiff 50% or more responsible. Oftentimes they can't recover. But man, in Virginia, it's all or nothing, as I understand it. So that is a tough standard. I don't really understand the reasoning behind it, but I know it's not easy.
It's a trade-off of some other things over the years. We don't have a lot of summary judgment in state court, so you do get to try your cases. We have a punitive damages cap of $350,000, but it's not like there was huge punitive damage awards in Virginia before that. So that was kind of a bone we threw to the insurance company years ago. As in many states, the malpractice laws have some screening requirements, and there is a unitary cap there. And as you know, like, look, no place is perfect, right? And so you've done a really good job of creating something that fits your life, right? Creating a firm. And I think this niche in these mega cases, and particularly these maritime, and then if you even niche down further, these pirate cases that you've been involved in over the years, of all things. So catch us up on the firm. How big? It's B&B Attorneys, as it's what my hat says that you sent me years ago.
Well, my partner's name is Vuk Vujasenovic. He's half Serbian. And so for many years we were Vujasenovic and Beckcom, and we just decided to shorten it. Actually, it used to be in Texas and a lot of the jurisdictions. I'm not sure how it is in Virginia. You couldn't have a trade name. Like, you could not practice under a trade name. And now in Texas, you can do that. And so, you were able to use the names of partners that had been retired and things like that. But Vujasenovic and Beckcom is a mouthful. The funny thing about it is, back when we called ourselves Vujasenovic and Beckcom, everybody spelled Vuk's name correctly. And my theory was they were so tired after they were done spelling his name that they always mess my name up, because I've got kind of an unusual spelling. But I'll tell you, back to what we were talking about, this contributory negligence thing. Last year, I was in San Francisco for a month trying a case in federal court. And it was a big case. It was a Maritime case, Jones Act case. Guy had three back surgeries, really badly hurt. And we're in there trying this case, felt really good about it. We go to the jury answers question one, was the defendant negligent? Yes. All right, we're going to win. And then they said apportion responsibility between the shipping company and the plaintiff. And they said 95% on your client, Brian, and 5% on the shipping company. And here's a $9 million verdict. So in most cases, that's a zero verdict. But in maritime law, it is absolutely pure comparative negligence. So I actually, believe it or not, got about a $500,000 verdict when everything was said and done. Now, there's one issue in that case that's really important. Under maritime law, if you're ordered to do something by a superior, it's called the specific order doctrine, then as a matter of law, you can't be responsible at all. And so that case is actually on appeal right now. There's a oral hearing in the Ninth Circuit Ninth Circuit out in California, Federal Circuit. And if the Ninth Circuit decides that my client was in fact ordered to do something, and I think the evidence is overwhelming for that, we get the whole verdict, even though the jury found my client 95. I still can't figure out how they did that, but it's quite a change. Now, there's no punitive damages really in maritime law. So like you said, there's trade-offs. And surprisingly enough, in maritime law, a wrongful death case is not as, quote, valuable as an injury case, because there's this weird aspect of maritime law that says if you die, the only thing you can recover is what they call pecuniary damages, which are lost wages and things like that. So again, it's like anything, Ben, and your attitude on life in general is a real inspiration to me. There's good things, there's bad things. Or you could just say they're different things. Like there is no good.
Yeah, and Brian, I tell people you see what you go and look for, and so knowing that there's good and bad, but waking up every morning and trying to go find the good out of everything. So let me ask you, out of curiosity, that's a giant verdict. Do you all handle the appeal in-house yourself, or do you hire an appellate team? I'm curious about that because you have a very robust operation, obviously.
That's a great question. And that's actually goes into kind of a larger issue that I've been thinking about a lot lately that I'd love to hear from you about. There's a couple things actually, Ben, and I know this is your podcast, but there's some questions that I'm really curious to ask you. But in terms of the size of my practice, we have 6 lawyers and about 7 or 8 staff, so roughly 10 to 12 people. We went completely and totally remote for almost all practical purposes during quarantine. And so I go to the office now about once every 2 months, maybe. And we're actually building an office building, which is going to take about a year. So I'm probably going to change that a little bit. But one of the things that I think has been really cool about going remote, and we were basically forced to do this during quarantine, is we went from being limited in number and who we could hire based on where they lived, essentially. Like they had to live close to Houston so they could go physically to the office, to now I can hire basically somebody from almost anywhere in the country. So so what I was saying was, to me lately, one of the big questions in my mind is, how much of my firm do I want to be full-time employees, and how much do I want to be whatever you want to call it, remote or contract or whatever? So let me give you a specific example of what I'm talking about. And by the way, I need to say this. This is our 20th year in practice. So we're having, as of April, is our 20th anniversary. So we've been doing this for a little while, not as long as you, but we've been doing it for a little while. But one of the things that we used to do forever is when, all of our cases pretty much are injury type cases, and people need medical care. And so we would have paralegals that would kind of help coordinate, make sure that their people are going to their medical appointments, and if they need some sort of specialist, helping them find the right people. And what I noticed, Ben, was that a lot of the defendants would hire these nurse case managers to basically coordinate the care of these injured people. And I was like, this makes me really uncomfortable, because basically it's like the defendant has somebody that can talk directly to my client. I didn't like that. And so I was like, I'm going to hire my own nurse case manager. So I hire, and he's not a full-time employee, but I now have somebody that lives in Arizona, And on the larger cases where there's complicated medical issues, I don't know if you've noticed this, but one of the things I've noticed about the medical system, if somebody is really catastrophically injured, oftentimes there's not one doctor who's in charge of everything. And so it's important to have somebody that can kind of coordinate everything in these catastrophic type situations. So I hired my own person, a nurse case manager, does this. I mean, has relationships with doctors all across the country, like the best doctors, make sure the client gets in, make sure and get the records and all that stuff. But anyway, the point is like the balance that I am kind of looking for right now is how many full-time employees do I need versus how much, I don't like the word outsource, but how much can I kind of contract out? And that's, I think you and I, if we wanted to, could build huge law firms. I have no desire to do that and really never have. We've got a nice team right now, but we're constantly kind of looking about, can we fill this piece in? Can we fill that piece in? So that's one of the, from a kind of business perspective,
my question back to you would be, when you talk to your current team, it's a rather compact team, what do they think about that idea? Because one of the, I'll say this, the thing that my son Brian and I learned in COVID was we didn't know all the answers, and we had never been through a worldwide pandemic before. And so when questions came up about things like, do we work from home? Because we have a lot of space here. It was safe to work here. What about childcare? We just said, hey, team, we don't know all the answers. We're curious of what would be perfect for you. Can't guarantee that we can give you perfect, but if you don't talk to us, we can't shoot for it. And that mantra, Brian, what would be perfect for you, is a discussion that to this day we continue to have with our team. We want this to be the very best place you'll ever work. We want to spoil you here, but you got to talk to us. All right. And again, we can't promise, but I can just tell you that when you're in an environment where the leadership will bravely ask that question and bravely consider the answers, right? That is a game changer, because no one else has ever asked them that question, right? And in a world where no matter whether you're hiring solely locally or you're hiring worldwide, and we have 3 that work out of an office in the Philippines, the Benglas Law team doing social media, records collection, some executive assistant work, and they're fabulous. They're fabulous, right?
Yeah.
But we know that we're all competing for talent, and A players are usually happy someplace else right now, and we got to go find them and poach them if we want them. But we have found, Brian, like being brave enough to ask that question, because it's not just, you and Vuk know, like, you can't be the lawyers and the leaders that you are without a great team around you who love coming to work, whether they're going to their bedrooms or their dining rooms to log in, or they're coming into the office.
Yeah. Well, I would, I'll give you a real specific example of that. So I have a lawyer who works for me. His name's Brendan, and my paralegal, Patty, has been with me for basically 20 years now. Was the AAJ Paralegal of the Year about 5 years ago. Brendan is about 35-year-old kid who is, we could talk for 2 hours about how great he is. He's got a 2-year-old boy. His name is Luca, and his wife is a teacher here in Houston. And his number one priority in life is his boy, raising his boy. And he loves to pick him up at school. Every single day he picks him up at 4:30. And the reason he can do that is because I don't make him come to the office for no reason. And so he loves, and I ask him all the time, hey, do you want to meet in person more often, or do you like this arrangement? And he says, hey, any way I can get an extra 5 minutes with Luca, I'll take it. So he loves it. And so that's why we're doing it that way. And quite frankly, I don't think I could hang on to Brendan if he didn't have that kind of freedom. And the good thing about it is, for me, my family has always come first too. And I've kind of built my practice around that. And so we see completely eye to eye as far as that goes. But I have such a good team. So I've been involved in something really crazy for the last 2 months, Ben, 2.5 months, that has nothing to do really with my practice. It has to do with the major institution in Texas that I've basically been taking on with the help of a few other people. But I called, I knew this was going to be a big issue a couple months ago. And I called Brendan and Patty and I said, hey guys, I'm going to be really busy for the next 2 months on something basically unrelated to the practice. I need you to hold down the fort. And that's exactly what they did. I have complete and total faith in them. And I've been able to do some really cool stuff involving some political issues and some major legal stuff in Texas. I mean, all the way up to the governor's office, the attorney general's office, stuff like that. And people are like, how can you do this, Brian? I mean, don't you have to run a firm? And I say, well, I got a great team. I mean, they ask me questions when they need to. But other than that, I'll tell you one thing I found out, Ben, about 10 years ago, a lot of the times when I get out of the way, they get more stuff done. Like when I leave them alone instead of constantly micromanaging, they get more stuff done than when I'm constantly on.
Well, this is so, a lot of lawyers, Brian, who listen to the Renegade Lawyer podcast are building practices, and most of them have built a good job that's a well-paying job. And they're at that point where, do I scale and really build a business that can work without me, like getting out of the way? And as you and I both know, like the biggest barrier oftentimes is our own ego, thinking that we have to be the ones involved in every decision. That nobody could write a brief or try a case or take a deposition as well as we could. And so, for us, like at that point in our practice a long time ago, like having the courage to start letting go of the vine, letting others do things. They're going to make mistakes. It's hardly ever something that we could do that's actually fatal. That's how you get there. But that's one of the biggest barriers to taking a well-paying job and creating a business is the owner, the lawyer in our case, getting his or her ego out of the way. Let me talk to you a little bit, though, because you've said several times now your team is great, and I know that it is. And at least substantially remote, sounds like. I don't know how many are actually going into the office there in Houston. But let's talk a little bit about how you maintain that culture where people want to keep coming, on Sunday night, like they're gearing up, they're happy to come and do the work for your clients. That also is a challenge for many folks listening to this.
Yeah. So, I think, I've talked to Brendan about this quite a bit because I check in with him, like, everything going good? Is there anything we need to change or anything like that? And I think fundamentally, a lot of lawyers, and I think I stole this from you, Ben. I've stolen so much from you, I kind of forgotten everything I've stolen. But a lot of lawyers will, when you say, what's the most important thing in your firm? A lot of people will say, well, the clients are the most important thing. And I say, no, it's not. The clients come and go. The most important thing are the people that I work with every day. And if they feel like they're doing something meaningful as opposed to just making money, then they'll come back. And if they don't, they won't. We had a paralegal leave about 4 years ago because she wanted a $5,000 raise. And I told Patty, I said, well, that's not a good, I understand, you want to make as much as you can and all that. And I don't hold that against people at all, but that can't be the only reason you're doing things. Like money ultimately is an empty path. You got to make enough money to be able to do the things you want to do and support your family. And if you want to be able to give back, you got to be able to do that. And you're one of the people, by the way, that taught me that nobody should be embarrassed about making money. Like, making money is the American way. And I'm happy that I make the kind of money I make doing what I do, but it can't be that can't be what it's all about. And there's got to be like a larger purpose. And the nice thing about my business is I get to pick and choose my clients. I can fire clients if they're not nice. And if they're not nice, I do fire them. And I love the people that I work with. Literally, it hasn't always been that way, but the vast majority of these folks are my friends, like truly my friends. And the nice thing about that is that snowballs. So the longer you do that, the more cases you get, the more people refer stuff to you. But I think, there's all sorts of studies out there, Ben. I'm sure you've read some of these books that basically say money is not a good motivator long term. It's purpose. People need purpose. They need to feel like they have some agency. In other words, like they can make decisions, and they need to feel like there's something more important than just seeing how much money you can make Beckham and Vuk. So that to me is the really important thing. And that actually dovetails into something I want to ask you about, because this has been on my mind a lot lately. I turned 50 a year and a half ago, and all of a sudden I started thinking about this, what do you ever want to call it, the second half, or what do I do now? Like, and my mindset has really shifted a lot from what can I do for myself to how can I have the biggest impact for other people? So you've been thinking about that for quite some time, and I'm just curious to hear kind of where you are on that.
Yeah, it's a great question, and thank you. But before I answer that, let me just make a point for listeners. Is back to your question, like who's the most important people, the client or the team? You know, when your team is the most important, then the clients will be well served, as Brian points out. And so, focusing on getting and keeping A players, and getting rid of the players who turn out to be C or B players even. Like, this is so critical. It's not easy. You don't do this overnight. As Brian points out, it's not all about money, but it is about, for us, for my son, Brian, and I, our purpose of running the firm is to build a place where people will thrive. The owners thrive. We're doing work we like. The team thrives. They're working with people they like, and they're doing meaningful work. And again, when you solve for A and B, then the clients will thrive. They just will. Now, to answer your question, so my view on this is that each of us is born and can develop over time a set of interests. You have talents and you have desires, things that just really drive you, interest you. It's not work. It brings you energy. I believe that we're put on earth to take whatever that set of gifts, interests, and talents are and to explode them, to put them out into the world. So, for example, I believe that one of mine is to inspire other people. As you and I are recording this, I've just finished, I had heart surgery 10 weeks ago. I just finished cardiac rehab. Everybody in that gym over at the hospital, I made smile at least once, right? I recruited some to the CrossFit gym, right? I'm sure I did. That's my, if you want to call it zone of genius, superpower, whatever, born and blessed, able to do that. Speaking on stage to inspire lawyers, that's my thing. There are things that I'm just not very good at. So if you say, hey, let's fly to another country and let's build a church or something with hammers and nails, not my gift, not my desire. I would be a detriment to that project. And it's okay to say no to a project like that, because I'm going to have plenty of opportunity, Brian, to think about what really energizes me and how can I affect as many people in the world. And, again, my role is to get them to see the positive and to act on the positive. I'm filling in all the gaps from what they don't teach in high school and they don't teach in college. So that's how I think, and you're right, I think about this a lot. And I think Sammy Chong. Sammy and I have worked together probably for almost a decade. My mindset coach, for those who don't know, is out of Toronto. And he has really helped me give myself, Brian, permission to think like that, to say that out loud, to be proud of it, and to move the world. Because one of the things about my heart condition was you just never know, like, when your last day is. You never know whether you actually are going to have tomorrow or not. I did not have a heart attack. I had symptomless, evaluation and discovered pretty significant heart disease. So every day is a bonus day. But that's how I think about that. And I would, encourage you, and you probably have this already, but to have that courage to just go, yeah, like whatever it is that drives Brian, you have permission to do that. You don't have to listen to anybody else saying, well, you should do this or you should do that. They're wrong. They can go do that. You do you.
Yeah, so I'll give you. Here's my current passion, and I've got a number of passions outside of my practice. But Yeah. So I walked into a Brazilian jiu-jitsu gym when I was 47 years old, didn't know a single person. I felt like a complete and total idiot. Half these people in that gym looked like they could kill me just by looking at me. I was so scared. And I tell you, for 6 months, I would come home at night and I was like in pretty extreme physical pain. I wasn't injured, but I was moving my bodies in a way that had
In
never
ways
been
you hadn't at
before.
least since you were 18 or something.
Yeah, well, really ever, because there truly are some biomechanical movements in jujitsu that are pretty unique to jujitsu and or grappling in general. And I had never wrestled or I was a basketball player growing up, so I'd never wrestled or anything like that. But anyway, I walk in there, and for about 6 months, I'd come home at night, and I would be like, "Oh my gosh!" And I decided to do a little experiment on myself. And here was the experiment: if I fight through, there's a difference again between being injured and just being in muscular pain. I was not injured; it was just really intense muscular pain. And I'm not a pain pill person, so I wasn't taking any pain pills or anything like that. But I was like, listen, I'm going to try to push through this and see if there's something on the other side of this. Okay. And after about 6 months, I got to the point where not only was I not sore like that, but I actually feel better when I train than when I don't. And so, but people are like going, Brian, you're 51 years old. Like literally today, I fought 5 rounds against a bunch of 25-year-old Brazilian black belt kids. What are you doing? Like, this is crazy. Why would you do this? And I'll tell you, there's a number of answers to this, but one of my passions right now is trying to set an example for people my age. That's just a number. If I can do it, anybody can do it. And I post a lot of videos now on my social media stories, particularly on Instagram, of me doing roles with people. And one thing I've been thinking about lately, Ben, is, we're talking about the future, is I'm a purple belt now. Hopefully I'll be a black belt within 2 or 3 years if I keep on this current pace. And I'd like to maybe start teaching classes for people specifically around my age, because I think jiu-jitsu is so good for your mental health, for your flexibility, for your strength, for your cardio. It's a complete workout. And I think a lot of people my age are afraid to try it. And because they think they're too old to do it. And I'm here to tell you, there are guys that train that are 60, 65, even 70 years old. And I'd like to maybe organize some classes around some older. And I become, by the way, this is another thing I've learned through jiu-jitsu. I've made some, and it's just like CrossFit. I've made some great friendships at an age in life where you don't make a lot of new friendships. And the reason for that is because we're all going through something very hard together. And when you go through something very difficult as a team together, that forms close bonds. Like the Brazilian guy, Opiano Malacheas, 45-year-old, comes from Brazil, had nothing, moves to LA. He's a bouncer in Hollywood. He now runs the biggest jiu-jitsu studio in the country and is the most patriotic American you will ever meet in your life, has become a really close friend of mine. And so, but anyway, that one of my passions right now is I'm kind of trying to set the example for people my age. And I got to say this, I'm trying to set the example for my kids too. So my oldest kid, Gus, is at Texas A&M, and he joined the Corps of Cadets as a freshman, which was a big deal for my family. My brother, myself, my father, and my grandfather were all in the Corps of Cadets. For people who don't know what that is, it's West Point. It's a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week military organization. It's the only thing like it in the country outside the military academies, and it is really difficult. It is hard for 18, 19-year-old kids nowadays to get their head shaved, wear a uniform, get up at 5:30 every morning, have to say yes, sir, and no, sir. But it's the best damn thing. It is the best damn educational opportunity in the country. And I think one of the reasons my son did it is because when I told him he should do it, he saw that I was doing hard stuff too. And it set a good example for him. My younger son just got an A&M, and in 2 months, he'll be in the Corps of Cadets too. So, but anyway, I kind of want to set an example for people to say, like you're always saying, Ben, Who said you can't do martial arts when you're 51 years old?
You and I are so aligned. Next month, I'll have my 7th birthday in CrossFit. So I started when I was 59. And like you, boy, those first 4 or 5 months, like every week, I'm like, how do people do this? Because again, not an injury, but just hurt. But like you, Brian, like my passion is introducing CrossFit to the over 50 crowd, right? And were I to, and I may do this, like it's in the back of my head, like I don't want to coach necessarily on a continued basis, but I would like to do the foundations class to say the same way I got introduced, which is, hey, are you 50 years old or over, former athlete? You want to come and do something hard in a group with people your age? Come over and do this, because I can teach, and I have a level 1 certificate from CrossFit. So, to start to teach people at any age that this is very doable. Yes, it can be hard work. Yes, it can be intimidating. The music is loud. Much stronger men and women in my gym who are lifting and dropping weights of large amounts. But I'm like the oldest in the gym. And I'm like, come on, let's do it. I will show you how to do this. Hey, let me switch gears. Let's talk a little bit about the legal, because you have been involved in some, many now large cases, but I think maybe one of your most famous involved piracy and the high seas, and a movie that was telling the wrong side of the story. So talk a little bit about that. I think folks are going to remember the story when you tell it, and just catch us up on if you have followed your client now in 2024. I don't know how he's doing. Your clients.
Client. Well, so for the Captain Phillips case, which is what you're talking about, that was basically the whole crew of the ship, or most of the crew. After that case, I actually got another piracy case with one individual client who I still keep up with pretty closely. But the first case, this was many years ago. People may remember this. An American ship, the Maersk Alabama, got hijacked by Somali pirates off the coast of East Africa. And it was in the news. Navy SEALs came. Obama ordered the Navy SEALs in. They ended up killing 3 of the 4 pirates. The fourth one is the only federal prisoner right now who is in prison for piracy, literally piracy. There's a question about how old he is, by the way. But anyway, I get a call from the cook of the ship, and he says, hey, we all got together with the captain and we wanted to do a book about this together. And the captain said, I don't want to have anything to do with you guys. And they're like, well, it was your fault. Like, you were told not to go there and you did it anyway. And you don't even want to do a book with this. And so they were pretty upset about it. They ended up hiring me. I had no idea when they hired me that this was going to be such a big deal. But anyway, I'm driving home. So I get hired. The crew hires me, file this lawsuit. I'm driving home one night and I get this call from Good Morning America, like literally on the way home. Hey, is this Brian? Yeah, this is Brian. Hey, you filed this case. We want to interview you about it. Okay, great. When do you want to do it? How about 10 minutes? What? Yeah, do you live at 12439 Massica? Yeah, great research. We'll meet. I said, okay, well, I'm almost home. I'll meet you there. And I called my wife up. I said, hey, honey, Good Morning America's on the way over. And she does what I think most wives would do. She immediately goes into cleaning mode. And so she's like cleaning the house furiously. And these Good Morning America folks come and they interview me about this case. Next thing I know, there's a movie starring Tom Hanks. I'm super worried, by the way. I told the judge, I said, man, we got to try this case before the movie comes out because everybody loves Tom Hanks. And Tom Hanks is paying Captain Phillips. And Captain Phillips is the enemy in this case. And it's going to completely prejudice me if we don't get to try this case before the movie comes out. And the defense lawyers, no, we can handle that with Ford. No big deal. Best thing that ever happened is the judge not continue this case. Why? Because the movie comes out and boom, like the publicity I got, it is still, I get reports every month of my highest performing webpage. It is still 15 years later, by far the most popular website or most popular web page on my website every month, and has been for 10 years. And you know what? Tom Foster predicted that. He told me, he said, this will be one of the most famous cases you ever work on. He was exactly right about that. And then a couple years after that, I got hired by a captain named Ren Thomas, former U.S. Marine. He was on the coast of West Africa when he got attacked by real pirate, like mercenaries, Boko Haram terrorists, taken into the jungles for 17 days. Ultimately, he was ransomed out. But I represented him in that case. That was another big case, not quite as famous as the one with Tom Hanks, but another good piracy case. So I haven't had any piracy cases recently, but boy, those were a lot of fun.
Talk to me as we close out here. What does the practice look like today? Who's the avatar client for you? Are you? I know you're doing cases. You do cases all over the country. Are you maritime centered, or are you doing med mal? I'm curious about the firm today as we talk in 2024.
We don't do any med mal, never have, because the laws in Texas are really challenging. Like, you have to basically specialize in that. There's so many pitfalls, and I just don't feel like
it's not your gift.
That.
Not your gift, talent, and interest.
Not my gift at all. Not my gift at all. Although, interestingly, I have a personal family experience with medical malpractice case. My mom died of medical malpractice, and that's kind of one of the reasons I think subconsciously I do what I do. But probably about half of my work is maritime or maritime related. It's all over the country. The other half is just big single event personal injury cases, again, all over the country. All this remote stuff and Zoom has broadened our practice. Basically, we went from Texas, Louisiana, New Mexico, a little bit of Florida to everywhere. And then the last group of cases we have is the Hurricane Harvey cases. So those are eminent domain cases against the United States government. We represent about 1,000 Houston homeowners who got their property flooded by the Army Corps of Engineers. We've won the case at the D.C. Court of Appeals. It's now on appeal, and if we win the appeal, that'll be a good thing for all these homeowners. But these cases take a long time. So that's mainly my practice now. I also do, by the way, a little bit of consulting type work for professionals who are either leaving a practice and they want to make sure they do it the right way, or they're getting fired and they're not getting separation bonuses. I've kind of started to do a little bit of that work too. So the nice thing about what you and I do, Ben, is the skills that we've developed as trial lawyers translate into different things, I think, really seamlessly. So, you can do a lot of things with the skills you have outside of person.
So, again, we haven't talked in a long time, but a significant part of Ben's business is consulting with healthcare providers across the country who have some physical or mental issue going on. They're thinking about tapping into their long-term disability policy. Raises all sorts of malpractice issues, board regulatory issues, issues obviously with the disability company. But Brian, you wouldn't be surprised. Most of the discussions that they have with me, I'm like, what do you want to do with your life? Like, okay, you can't operate anymore. I'm sorry. We can help you get your benefits. Now let's talk about the next stage of life. You have gifts, interests, and talents. So what are you going to do? And I thrive on that. And it is taking this gift set that I have and moving out of personal injury space into talking to these very interesting physicians, nurses, nurse anesthetists, just about every week from everywhere around the country. So you're exactly right. And that's a fun spot for me. How much, so lots of questions, because you mentioned trying a case in federal court for a month, that would be challenging for anybody, just the logistics and the time away from home and all that. So how much of your time today, Brian, is spent being a lawyer and doing the lawyer thing versus leading the firm?
Yeah, if I'm doing it right, I spend as much time as possible on the second part of that, like just making sure that the right people are doing the right things. Now, I'm a alpha personality, and so I want to get in there and take depositions still and mix it up a little bit. I actually enjoy that. It's funny because for 15 years I was like, wouldn't it be great, Vuk, if we each had 10 to 15 multi-million-dollar cases and we could just pour all our time and effort into that small set of cases, really get to know the clients well, really just do an absolutely bang-up job on a smaller set of cases. And you know what I realized? Because Brendan told me about it a year ago. He goes, "You've got that right now." He says, "I can handle a lot of the smaller cases for you, and you can completely dedicate. You can pick and choose which ones you want to handle. But my mind hasn't quite shifted because, I've always had, 50, 60, 70 cases. Vuk's always had 50, 60, 70 cases. And I have this notion that's the way you're supposed to do it. But what I'm trying to do now is I'm trying to pick like 5 to 10 of the most, and by the way, it's not always the biggest cases. It's the cases that interest me the most, and really do a deep, one of the things I love about the law is when I can go super deep on a case and like just sit there and completely focus and just do an amazing job. What causes me stress is when I'm doing little piddly things on 50 different cases. Like that's stressful to me. I'm a Cal Newport guy. As a matter of fact, I'm going to take credit for sending you that book.
Oh, you're the first to send it. Yeah, it's one of my annual rereads.
And by the way, he's got a great podcast that you should listen to. He talks about a lot of that stuff. I'm a big fan of Cal Newport, but I think I'm way happier when I am completely focused on one thing and one thing only, and I can do a super deep dive and put everything aside. I get stressed when I'm like, okay, I got to do this. So that's really where I'm trying to go is like, when you hire me, I'm going to if I personally handle your case, you are going to get absolutely the best like the Tiffany level of representation.
At the end of the day, I think that's what we're supposed to be getting paid for, is like our creativity and focus. Because honestly, like anybody can take a deposition and write a complaint, but who's strategizing about how are we going to help the client solve this problem? Right? Whatever their problem is, doesn't matter your practice area. And so to be able to run a practice and run a life that allows you to go deep, that is a place to be. Brian, I would be remiss if I didn't mention the Lessons from Leaders with Brian Beckcom podcast. You have had some fantastic guests on that. So I highly recommend that lawyers who are listening to this go find Lessons from Leaders with Brian Beckcom. Brian, give us the URL, the firm name, if folks want to just check out what you're doing, if they have a big giant case and they need a team like you and your team, how do they find you?
I want to say one thing about the podcast real quick, but VB Attorneys, that's V as in VB Attorneys. We're on all the social media. We're on all the YouTube. We're on the web. All you got to do is type in Brian Beckcom or VB and you'll find us everywhere. I'm real active on Instagram now because that's where all the jiu-jitsu guys are. And frankly, there's not a lot of politics on it, which I like. But I want to say one thing about the podcast. So my podcast, Lessons from Leaders, started during quarantine. The idea was to focus on, I was seeing all this negative stuff online and stuff. And I was like, let's put a little positivity out in the world. But I had a profound experience with a recent podcast episode, and I want to encourage your listeners, if they have time, to listen to this particular episode. So in the fall, a very close friend of mine who had cancer for 5 years got a terminal diagnosis. And I had been talking to him over the last 4 or 5 years about different things, and my mom had died of cancer, and we had become even closer. And he calls me up and says, I got a 4 to 6 month terminal diagnosis, and I want to write a book. Like, you've written some books, and I want you to tell me how you've done it. And by the way, I learned how to write the books was from you. And I told Jim, my friend, I said, why don't you come on the podcast? And he said, well, nobody's going to want to listen to me. Well, nobody cares what I have to say. And I was like, I think, Jim, you might be surprised. So he comes on my podcast, and we spend an hour talking about his perspective, living, dying, faith, family. Had no idea how it was going to turn out. When I was done shooting the podcast, I went downstairs and I told my wife, I said, that was one of the most positive, believe it or not, experiences I've ever had. And that podcast, Jim died about 4 weeks ago. And that podcast is by far my most popular podcast. It has reached so many people. I've gotten so many comments from that. I've had people say, man, I had lost touch with Jim. I saw your podcast. I reached out to him. The message that he has, the perspective he has, is absolutely incredible. And so if any of your listeners are interested in a topic like that, Jim Goldsmith is his name. It's one of the most recent podcasts, Lessons from Leaders. I think it's got 5,000 listens on YouTube and another 10,000 on all that. I mean, it is, and it wasn't planned. It just kind of worked out. But it's a really good show.
And you could take that episode now and write the book that he probably didn't get around to writing, right? And I know you have turned 100%. In the past, you've turned your success articles in your newsletter into a book. I think you turned podcast episodes into something. I may be wrong on that.
No, it's about. So I did a speech twice to United States Air Force officers on leadership based on what I learned in the podcast, and then I turned that into a book on leadership. Yeah, which is basically me saying these are the things I've learned from all these really super cool guests.
And if you stayed around to listen to the very end of this, Brian just gave you a fabulous idea to how you can, take something like a podcast. And the reason many of us do podcasts is because we get to talk to interesting people, and it's fun. Yeah. Just outside of the legal work and the legal stuff we often talk about, it's just fun to talk to interesting people and get ideas. And then Brian has repurposed work that he has done, really, and this is all a topic for another day, but it's all about building out his personal brand as well. The things that Brian is known for besides being a great trial lawyer come through in his podcast, his newsletter, his website, things like that. So, my friend, it's really been great to catch up with you. I'm so glad that we have this opportunity to do that. We'll have to catch up on your podcast too. When he's in your lineup, that would be really fun.
I was going to say, I want you to come back on. And one of the things I do, Ben, is I've been on a number of podcasts, and what I like to do, especially when they go really well, is once you release your podcast, I then have my people call your people and say, hey, can I release the podcast we just did on my platform? And that hopefully will give you some extra juice. It'll also help me introduce people to people I like. So I'm going to have Alba reach out to you, and we'll for sure get something set up. You were the very first guest.
That's right. Oh, that's right. Yes.
Number one. Yeah. And I'll tell you something, when, in all seriousness, when I announced that, I'll never forget Jim Goldsmith, my friend who died, messaged me and he goes, boy, Ben Glass, that's a big get. He knew who you were. He was a practicing lawyer.
You're
he knew exactly who you were.
Well, look, say hello to your lovely family. Yeah. It is interesting when they get to that kind of college age and they all come back for the summer. So I'm sure it'll be, hopefully your generator won't actually have to do a whole lot of heavy lifting this summer, and the weather will improve. But Brian, my blessings to you and to your family. It's been a really fun hour, sir.
You look great, Ben. Great talking to you. And we'll definitely get you on my show soon, my friend.
Good to chat.
All right. Yep.
If you like what you just heard on the Renegade Lawyer Podcast, you may be a perfect fit for the great legal marketing community. Law firm owners across the country are becoming heroes to their families and icons in their communities. They've gone renegade by rejecting the status quo of the legal profession so they can deliver high-quality legal services coupled with top-notch customer service to clients who pay, stay, and refer. Learn more at greatlegalmarketing.com. That's greatlegalmarketing.com.